I have relationships with women and sex with men.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
Dude. Oh, it's perfect. I got news for you. It means you're gay.
Have you seen the other one? It might be from the same episode where it's like that wasn't a gay bar. They had hockey on TV. And she's like, was anyone watching it? And then he's like,
oh no. Checkmate, chuds.
So we just got to like roll into it, kind of. What's the case for ethical veganism? Atheism?
So there's this cuck on the internet called Vegan Gains, and he makes his way around.
Does he look extremely unhealthy?
No, he's pretty jacked, dude. Like, he takes his health pretty seriously, I think. You know, he's called Vegan
Does he have like that
Gains.
Zoloft face that a lot of vegans have?
He does seem to have a fluoride stare, if you know what I mean.
I just pulled him up, and I think he looks mentally insane. Can I get sued for saying that?
No, he's a public figure. Effectively.
Some people just have a certain look in their eyes that like is a warning bell to me.
Do you know what he looks like to me? That poll meme of the 56%?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like the genetic stew. Like nothing stands out as like, if you're like, where's this guy from? He could be from Spain. He could be from Mexico. He could be from like the Maldives. He could be from Brazil. He could be from like South Africa, like, or Australia.
Most people who don't eat meat seem to be unhappy, and seems to be a correlation.
Well, it's sort of like imagine being like a hardcore pro-life advocate, right? And they're like, oh, it's just an abortion. It's like, it's not an abortion, it's murder. You're fucking murder. Like, I'd pass, if I was Judge Dredd, I'd pass summary execution right here and now, right? And they feel that way about animals. And they're like, this is fucking evil. So, like, if you've come to that moral conclusion that animals have agency, then yeah, I think it's incredibly consistent. And I'd be like, of course you'd be a fucking nervous wreck, dude. You'd be like, everywhere you go, people are wearing the skins of children and stuff. Like, because not only do they have agency, they're innocent. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know, but one thing I've been looking at a lot lately is that I found really quite interesting, and there's just data after data point behind it, is like the mental misery suffered by leftists as compared to right-wingers.
Yeah.
And you see, like, there's kind of like some points in time where it goes up for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess in like graphing language, like the line is shifted up way more for the liberals, especially liberal women. And I've been fascinated for a while here, just understanding everything that goes into this as to why leftism makes people miserable. And an interesting part of it too is if you look at the so-called long COVID thing, it's highly connected to like depression and anxiety. And even though the numbers are in, men are apparently more affected by the virus than women.
Yeah.
But women are far more likely to be affected by so-called long COVID. And I mean, that's just one illustration, but there's just this mountain of evidence that the left-wing mentality makes you miserable, makes you anxious, or being anxious makes you left-wing, or like, there's this reinforcing effect or something. And I find it very interesting. Any thoughts?
You're familiar with the placebo effect, right?
Yes.
Like, it's fucking magic. It's actual magic.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing.
It's magic that we can't explain, and like, we know the mechanisms behind and how it manifests, but we don't know the mechanisms behind in which it presents. So all we do is like make double blind tests. Like, if you had a pharmaceutical trial and you didn't do a double blind, like no one would fucking buy it, right? it's that strong. It's the criteria for actually analyzing, does this thing do a thing on people? And there might be a corollary between this idea of the placebo effect making you like into like a long COVID sufferer or a tranny or a oppressed individual, and the placebo effect when it comes to your identity. You know what I mean? Like sympathetic pregnancy and the placebo effect are these things that kind of we see them in people, we observe them, and we control for them, but we haven't tied them to political thought or identity.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors in the placebo effect that are very interesting, but I think it kind of comes down to, in some way, that like your, maybe for lack of a better term, like your attitude affects your body. Like, actually, Mises, one thing that stuck out, Mises wrote about in, I think it's in Human Action somewhere, but when he's talking about like social benefits and like disability insurance, basically, as an aspect of like kind of a welfare state or program. He doesn't really beat around the bush. He basically says, and I think there's a lot of truth to this, being disabled or being unable to work or being like, having your capacities constrained is of more than anything else, obviously, except in a case where you're like blatantly crippled or something, but in a lot of cases it's just your attitude. You can be as disabled as you want to be, or you can be like Hillary Clinton and just power through it.
Yeah. she's a hero.
Yeah, really. But
how many times have you been thrown in a van while on political campaign?
Dragged into a van,
just
like shoved in there,
having fucking epileptic fits
like
on stage.
At Bernie's.
Yeah. Dude, she got vanned, dude. Like, you just see her go limp. And it was just, the best part, it was just some dude with a cell phone. He's like, that's Hillary Clinton. Like, look at her get fucking removed from the situation by like a bunch of dudes. Like, she couldn't even go down a set of stairs.
You know, these politicians are like so old. Canada has relatively younger politicians, it seems, and I don't know, like, it's not better or worse, like they're all horrible, but like the US empire is governed by these like old fogies, and they're not the end all be all, like, but even the there's old geezer president, whether it's whoever, like Obama was obviously pretty young, but Trump's pretty old. Hillary was old if she had won. Biden's like the crypt keeper. And everyone's always complaining like, we need term limits because these people are too old. And you get clips of people with dementia like rambling in the house, and like someone pulls them away or like whispers in their ear like to get on track or something. They're like, oh, come on, grandma, that's really great. But
do you think it's fucked up that they still have to use props? Like, they can't just get them on there. They have to print them out on like fucking poster board to show Congress. They're like, look at this graph.
Yeah, no PowerPoint for these guys.
You can't even get no, I think it's like a rule. Like, it can't be entered into evidence or like as part of the hearings. It has to be like printed out.
You know what? I kind of like that. I'm a big fan of like the printed physical thing. But
were you a fan of Ross Perot?
He was not really.
Really?
I mean, he's kind of like...
He was actually kind of a badass for his day.
He kind of was, but at the same time, he was kind of like one of these guys who's like, you just need some common sense in the government.
Yeah. Isn't that what every politician every reformer talks about?
Did after the little Trudeau retreat with like the Liberal caucus or the ruling party, didn't they go on like a 3-day retreat and come back and say something like they were gonna like start using common sense? Am I wrong? Did I just make that up?
No, it
or
sounds
something to that effect.
basically
we're gonna get back to common sense and what
MPs
matters to people.
Yeah, the MPs were like, dude, you are fucking this up for me. Like, my meal, I'm never going to get my nice, cushy fucking retirement, dude, because you are going to get us all fucking kicked out of here.
Okay, well, we're kind of all over the place. Let's talk, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, the old people, well, to finish up the old people, I would say, would you, if you were to have a king, because that's what these people are. They're not servants of the public. Like they're the kings that appoint the bureaucratic masters, right? They're the gatekeepers to power. And like for some reason they get to go like, oh, this guy's in charge of Indian affairs, or this guy's in charge of Homeland Security, and like this guy's in charge of justice. All of the justice. And would you prefer that guy to be a young, like kind of like JFK wasn't really young when he was elected, but he was young comparatively. So would you rather have like a young king or an old king?
Well, kind of in this democratic context, it's like what we were saying, how sometimes the BoomerCon will look at Trudeau and like, stop going on vacations and get back to work. And it's like,
smart no.
I think the less they work, the better. And in a sense, like the younger people are often more motivated to change things or fix things, and the old fogies, whatever they say, whatever they have to say about this or that in speeches and the propaganda lines they spew, I don't actually think they are as motivated to actually do stuff. I think they're like more fossilized and more happy with the status quo and change. It's like if you're an old geezer who retires and you just want to sit in your chair all day, that I think that same kind of image applies to the power hungry 80-year-old politician
Just
who he just wants to like
autistically stare at a fire.
Sit on his rocking chair on the porch and watch people walk by.
I just want to
and
grill.
Maybe have a maybe feel important once in a while.
Have a nap.
But in democracy, I think it's way better to be stagnant than have people coming in to fix it.
Yeah.
And like the only advantage conservatives offer, I think, relative to the horrible kind of liberal regime is that they just move a little more slowly in trying to fix things or make things better. But obviously everything the government does basically always leads to worse outcomes. And the less they do, the better. Like the more they're on vacation, the better. Generally, I'd say I'd prefer really old, slow-moving, uninteresting, unimaginative, set in their ways kind of politicians.
Then who would
And that's why I don't like the term limits idea. People are like, well, term limits would really fix this problem.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would, because again, the more you cycle through, the more you get like fixers coming in like, I'd really like to implement this new program.
Yeah.
Who's more likely to implement a new program? Is it some young guy like, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez type person? Or is it frickin' Biden?
Yeah.
I'll take the Biden. Give me the fossil. Give me the dinosaur. Give me the crypt keeper.
I think just having like an old ass head of state who doesn't do it. Like the Queen is the perfect kind of leader. Has no power, can't do anything, just sits there and is in charge somehow. All things are done in her name.
But so apparently, speaking of our glorious young, handsome leader, Mr. Justin Trudeau, apparently he's not very popular at the moment. People are pissed.
I guess 56% of people polled by the last set of polls were like, you should step down.
Is that a lot?
That's a lot.
I don't think Canadians like people to step down very much.
Well, it's 56.
It reflects badly on them, and Canadians can't handle like any kind of being perceived as making mistakes.
He should step down as leader of the Liberal Party before the next election. That was the question. And 25% said no. We're fucking I stand with Trudeau. #.
Well, he's going through a divorce, and I think the sane thing to do. He's like, yeah, I want to be private, but the reasonable, responsible family thing to do would probably be to step back from public life and deal with your. But someone like him obviously can't do such a thing.
Yeah.
But anyone who replaces him is like DOA, I think, because it's like when they fumbled around with
Andrew Scheer.
Yeah, they'd get like an Andrew Scheer kind of guy.
Who's the liberal
or
Andrew
they'd
Scheer?
Get, who are those guys they had in a few dud elections, like Ignatieff and the Rise Up guy?
Yeah. Do you think Christie
same thing with Rachel Notley in Alberta. She's got to go, and I think she's going to be leaving soon. And I think that Thomas Lukazik guy is going to take her place or try to take her place.
Yeah.
You know who that is?
No.
He's that former PC guy who his scandal was like a big cell phone bill, like while he was in Poland or something. But anyway, he hates like the current PC party because, you know, you got the left didn't leave me, or I didn't leave the left left me. He's like the
right left me.
The progressive conservative version of that. He's like, I didn't leave conservatism left me. And he's like, I don't like the crazies who have taken over the. He's one of these guys like the Farkases and the reasonable moderates who are like, the crazies have taken over, or like the extremeness or the lack of civility. So he's one of these guys, but he's basically like a leftist who was in a so-called conservative party because that's the way you would get power back in the day. Like when they had 60 out of 80 seats, if you wanted to be a politician, you would obviously join the party that's going to win most of the time. So he's one of these guys, but he's been in some Islamic financing corporation, like that has a special license from the government to, you know, I mean, it's kind of fake because it's like, interest-free loans, but it's just the way the costs are structured. Like, there's no such thing as an interest-free loan that is economically practical. Like, it's charity if that's what you're doing. But they just structure the fees differently, so there's still... Anyway, kind of besides the point, but that's what he's been doing. But he might want to make a return to politics as the form of Rachel Notley's replacement, which I think would be hilarious, because no one likes this guy. Yeah. He's a clown. I think he's got rage issues. And but he was spotted like drinking heavily with Rachel Notley on some patio a month or two ago.
Yeah. Did he get belligerent?
So that's my theory.
Okay.
Do you think that's interesting? Thomas Lukazik
it's
coming to save the NDP.
No,
you know, there's been an election since we last chatted, and the NDP was crushed.
Yeah,
not numerically, but they lost. Like in a binary sense, they did not win. Yeah, which was good.
Well, I noticed a lot of people are now joining arms behind Daniel Smith. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, get in line.
Get in line, exactly. And so she's a little disappointing, of course, so far. Like, nothing major happening. But I must say, the thing that's people have been raging against, and when it comes to the politics of, like, hurt your enemies, kiboshing, like, all these renewable power projects, I think is absolutely exquisite. Because what people don't realize, like, these leftist shysters coming and saying like, oh, this is supposed to be the party of the economy and like prosperity, and they're chasing out all this capital investment and stuff. These are not like value adding projects. Yeah. The model is you get above market power purchase agreements to make it viable. So you get like basically a locked in rate to sell to the electricity system, basically. Mm-hmm. So you're profitable on your otherwise unprofitable solar farm or whatever. Yeah. And that was the NDP model. Like, basically subsidize these crappy projects and it'll all work out someday, maybe. Or you're our friend, so we'll hook you up with a sweet deal. So to have all these deals kiboshed, I think is hilarious and awesome.
Earlier we said, like, would you rather have an old king or a young king? And I think I would want a young king so that he could punish my enemies. The old man would...
Unless you're the enemy, then he'll punish you. But if
Yeah.
you want to punish your enemies and he's on your side, roughly speaking.
What do you think about the tendency within a democracy to elect people to punish your ideological enemies? Because a lot of this is about like humiliating your opponents, like your ideological opponents. Like you have to use a paper straw.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate the paper straw. Well, so...
Like, fuck you. Drink from this paper straw, you fucking right-wing bitch.
Yeah, it is a lot about humiliation, and some people say like the best argument for democracy is that it's just like a peaceful way to shift power around so that people aren't shooting each other to take over the government or like a regime change.
Yeah.
And so what is that? Like, if there's a fight, you're punishing your enemies. And if it's transformed into the democratic process, you're punishing your enemies in a quote unquote peaceful way.
Yeah.
But of course, politics is violence. Government is violence.
Yeah.
Government is force. That's what, the exercise of power is.
That's like saying betting on a gladiatorial match is charity. Like,
And that's the thing with like the weaknesses of the conservatives and the right, or even libertarians. Like they don't realize that the enemy wants to like humiliate and crush them. They want to have a fair fight, and it's not a fair fight. And you have to actually be engaged in a way that weakens your enemy so that they can't hurt you as badly.
you have to shut windows when you get into the fucking house. Do you know what I mean? Like Trudeau shut windows on this whole trucker protest. Like extra laws were put into place so that you can't use heavy machinery, and a bunch of like kind of additional like kind of lines were written into acts and like procedures. They're like, yo, if they show up with like a backhoe, like tow 'em, like on the spot. And if you don't do it, like we'll kill you, or we'll take your business license, which is basically the next best thing. So the rights, they tend not to do that. They tend not to shut windows.
That's why I think the power thing is interesting. Like you're basically cutting off your enemy's crony pals from resources. Yeah. And that's really what like the political war has to be about. And I mean, it's not even necessarily like a bad thing. It's kind of like a self-defense act, because every other, to the degree to which your enemies are getting more and more resources as like the state wields power against you, that's not good for you. It's the necessary effect of that is limiting your own like fewer resources for normal productive people, and fewer options, fewer liberties, and so on and so forth.
Do you think that moderates identify political actors as enemies ever?
No, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
They think it's all like this fair fight, like it's the marketplace of ideas idea. Like it's just we're all in the arena, we're all playing fair, we're all playing by the same game.
We all want what's best.
We all want what's best. We're all and that's kind of like that's like the poison pill in the liberal society. Like you set it up, maybe it's kind of like the Anglosphere liberal concept, where it's like, okay, we all disagree on some stuff, but we got to live together.
Yeah.
So let's set up the system where we can work
manage
it out.
Conflict. Yeah.
But your enemies are still going to seize that system, and it's not like a fair, neutral battleground.
Would you say they subvert it?
I think they use it more intelligently because they understand the nature of
Agreed.
Power. Whereas a lot of people, they feel dirty using it the way their enemy does.
Yeah.
But that's what you got to do to protect yourself against those people.
Yeah. Moral high ground's only good for losers, dude.
Well,
you got to pull a Sulla, dude. You got to just you got to proscribe like everyone and everything, dude. Just and never let it
But
go.
I don't think if you can, it's good to be skeptical of the use of power, but if you're using your tools to protect yourself, that's not giving up the moral high ground. That's still holding the moral high ground if you're not, if you're not crushing the innocent, that's okay. If you're hurting your political enemies, kind of by definition, they're not innocent.
Do you think there's morality in punishment?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, people need to be punished for what they did. It's justice.
Okay. So there's morality in justice.
Yeah, because justice involves putting things in their right place, like restoring order, restoring balance, or like setting things right, and that involves retribution and punishment. I mean, the leftist element in politics has seized a lot of power in many different aspects of
Everything.
like the whole system, like kind of politics and extra political. And to then cut them off from that, if you can, if you could cut them off or cut off their access to resources or take that power that they've seized for themselves away from them, there's nothing dirty or immoral or unjust about doing that. Like, you would have to assume they have a claim to these things, which they act like they have a claim, they speak like they have the claim. And we've almost framed the discussion in such a way where even though we don't like what they're doing, we basically act like they kind of have the right to do it because they won fair and square or something. But they don't. Like, there's no just claim for them to have the tools at their disposal and to use them the way they do. So to any degree, you can take resources away from the bad guys, cut them off from political power, punish them in some way. Those are actually good things. And sometimes, because of the context of the world we live in, like, you and I are never going to be like running the government or anything. But if, vaguely speaking, someone who's on our side who does wield some kind of power does do any of those things, like cut off resources, I mean, that's
what people wanted from Trump, dude. They wanted to sell it.
Yeah, they wanted to punish their enemies.
Yeah. I want you to see, I want to see you break their fucking kneecaps, dude. Like, this particular institution, shut it down. The money that the universities get, shut it down. Like, just shut it all down. And then he wins, and they're like, I saw this supercut where he was just like, yeah, I'm going to put Hillary Clinton in jail. And, he fucking smoked her with like these great lines. And then afterwards, after he gets in power, he's like, no, they're good people.
Yeah, well,
they're good people.
Trump had a legendary inauguration speech where the drain the swamp line came from.
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing. And of course, you're like, what's he actually going to do? And of course, he didn't do anything. I think one person, the only people who got fired were basically people he brought in himself.
Yeah. He fired a lot of his own people because they...
The bad guy he fired, I think, was Comey. That's it. And I mean, look at what... it doesn't matter what you think of Trump, but just think like kind of in practical terms. All these agencies going against you.
Yeah. You're six...
You could just... In theory, you can just fire these people. And he didn't fire anyone. He just let them go. Let them do whatever they want. Let them disobey him. Remember when...
But did you notice how he didn't get shot?
Yeah, you don't need to get shot because he had no power. All the leftist outrage convinced him that he was like all powerful.
Yeah.
And really he had basically no power at all.
He did have some power in terms of how he could shuffle decks. You know what I mean? Like but like all the stuff that he tried to do, somebody would bring an appeal and some Fifth Circuit judge would shut it down, and like the entire federal government would halt because like somebody who's like a Third Circuit judge is just like, nope. And they'd have to go to they'd have to bring it back all the way to the Supreme Court to fucking get it done. Like,
yeah, I mean, that shows how a lot of those institutions are like kind of seized by his political enemies. So like he can be in charge on paper, but they don't. The big thing is like the bureaucracies, especially like the national security bureaucracies. I don't think they care who's president.
No,
I
of
think
course
they
not.
pretty much do whatever they want. And like some of these guys are there for 20, 30, 40 years. They're like the fossils we were talking about, but
Yeah.
they're the guys who actually have way more kind of real power than the politicians. And I think they can basically just ignore things they don't want to do. Because what's someone going to do? No one understands. I don't think they could deal with the criticism of like, I'm going to fire James Brennan or whoever, because they're afraid. And I mean, these, the secret police or the national security apparatus, they can probably do a lot of harm to you. Like Schumer, when he was on MSNBC, he's like, "Oh, Trump, you don't want to go after the CIA. They can get you."
Yeah.
It's like, that's an interesting thing to say.
Yeah.
Or when there was the one guy who said like, "Yeah, we lied to Trump about how many troops we had
Yeah.
in Syria," and like they
We did it
just
for the
don't
good of the
care.
nation. Dude, you wrote a book about how we fucking lied to him.
And they were
Yeah.
proud of it. And
Yeah.
of course they're fighting the good fight. So, they don't, like what a scene.
Everything
it's pretty
I-
interesting actually.
Dude, they all think they're Jack Bauer. Everything I did for the Constitution. I'm a patriot, dude.
Yeah. I love Jack Bauer.
We rewatched a little bit of 24 up at the lake. And, dude, there'll never be a show like it, dude. Can't.
It was a very unique thing that, intersected with politics in a pretty interesting way. Like people were mentioning it like on the floor of the House of
Yeah.
Representatives and the Senate. And,
Yeah.
the war on terror when it was in its prime was quite the scene.
Dude, 1 million dead Iraqis. And, like, not an apology has been handed, dude. Like,
Oops, sorry, LOL.
like people are just like, oh, Americans are all fucking losers. And, like, do you understand that they managed to get their entire population and a coalition of the willing, with big quotation marks around it, to go into countries and murder people? Like, not like fight enemy combatants, like fucking murder people, rendition them, fucking tuck them away, like strip them naked, sick dogs on them, fucking, put bacon on them.
Yeah, Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, dude. And then they held an election. They're like, all right, boys, good job. Mission accomplished. We're done here. And they're like, wait a second. What did Iraq have to do with anything? They're like, what the? Wait, why are we here again? It's 5 years later. And they're just like, doesn't matter. We're never apologizing. Fuck you. This is what happens when you poke Rome. You want to fuck around? Like, move Carthage, move your city 3 miles inland. And then they do it and they go, 2 more miles. Fuck you.
Yeah, well, that's like blast from the past, and they, I guess it's the logic of empire, and I don't know if it totally relates to what we were talking about, but these.
Well, I got there from
Interests.
24, but we got to 24 from something else. But
Well, 24 had a lot of corrupt bureaucrats in it.
Yeah.
Very often the bad guys were at some
and
level
they
of
always
the
said
chain,
they were
there was
patriots.
a corrupt. Yep.
Yeah, we're patriots.
Said they were patriots. They're corrupt bureaucrats. A lot of it was kind of interesting because they showed basically the way they set up like counterterrorism unit or CTU. Like
Yeah.
they can do anything. They've got like the technology to do whatever they want, find whatever they want, get any information they want.
Open web sockets.
And a lot of the failures are
Yeah.
because of bureaucrats with interests that are against what the show would present as like the good or the just interest.
Yeah.
And Jack Bauer's usually going against it. Sometimes he's got to like rough up some bureaucrats, or sometimes he's got to break a few kneecaps.
Mason. So I've noticed on social media and even amongst polite company that when the waters were tested for masking and lockdowns, because people equate masking with lockdowns now, which is great. But you have a bunch of like people who I think were like neutral 3 years ago, having the audacity to come out and say, I won't comply. I'm not doing this again. Because it's safe to say that right now, right? But what do you think they think about the idea? Like, do they understand what non-compliance actually fucking means? Like, do they get it?
No.
Like, it's all just
It's
like,
just a slogan on Twitter.
I won't comply. Like, you don't have a choice, dude. You don't have a choice. Like, you are going to have to live like a criminal. Fucking get used to it.
Non-compliance means, like, doesn't mean you start chucking Molotovs or whatever, but it means you don't obey and really, like, you suffer the legal consequences, like some of these churches and some of these restaurant guys did.
Yeah.
All those charges are getting dropped in case you didn't see, like,
Yeah, I
because
saw.
prosecution's like, yeah, I give up.
Yeah, they should. There's no good faith.
About freaking time. But anyway, yeah, no, they don't. Like, a lot of these people, they couldn't even be bothered to. They might have talked a big game.
Yeah.
But they weren't going to not wear a mask to the grocery store and risk getting, like, asked to leave.
Yeah.
Now, if I do say so, I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, you had to go.
And I had to deal with it. I got asked to leave a few places.
Yeah.
I got asked to leave a Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
I got asked to leave a Chapters.
Yeah.
I got asked to leave a co-op.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're not willing to subject yourself to that,
Yeah.
you're not in the non-compliance game.
Yeah.
So if you've kind of failed round one, maybe you learned your lesson and you'll be tougher next time, but I'm not really encouraged by all this tough talk. I think, I genuinely think it'll be hard to bring it back the way it was before, but I think there's going to be a few attempts, and the fact that it wouldn't be impossible is kind of like the condemnation of people. Enough people would get on board and you'd still have a meaningful minority that would be against it, but they would still essentially be cooperative. And if you really wanted non-compliance, like, yeah, you have to subject yourself to inconvenience and punishment. You got to put yourself out there. You got to be willing to get into a confrontation. Most people just aren't willing to do it.
Yeah. I think all I would do is put out some fake statistics. I'd have the Royal Society just fucking whip something together for me real quick and be like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter whether you got your boozer or not. This one's super evasive. And
well, I mean, I assume you brought it up because the propaganda is kind of like
it's on its way.
So
dude.
we've got like, it's booster season.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, well, you got to get your booster because it's scary. You don't want to get sick, do you? And have you seen how the cold has been rebranded to RSV so that it sounds scary? And I've seen vaccine commercials on TV for RSV. I'm like, what a scam.
You can't. Yeah, that was
like the whole idea of the vaccine for the coronavirus or novel coronavirus in the first place was totally ridiculous. And I think that's been borne out. But now they're keeping up the lie, and it's rebranded into, oh, well, make sure you get your vaccine for the RSV when you get your flu shot. It's like, you can't. You're just lying to people. Like, there's nothing you can put past these people because that's kind of how it works. And, like, they're just shills for big pharma and what have you. Yeah. Now, we're seeing the tip of the spear on the mask cult and the lockdown cult because they need to validate their existence to get this. Yeah, some no-name university had 0 cases. Yeah. So they're having a 2 weeks to flatten the curve issue. Lionsgate Studios. Yeah. Maybe someone got sick, so everyone has to wear an N95 for 2 weeks. And I don't know if this is true because there's a lot of internet boomercons are very gullible. Yeah. But apparently there's some long-term care facility in Edmonton. This wouldn't surprise me at all. But apparently on the second floor of the facility, you have to wear a mask because someone tested positive for the virus. So we've got 3 examples of it being imposed. Yeah. And hopefully it doesn't get much farther, but I think you'll see
No, it
kind
will.
of this decentralized effort kind of bubble up in not necessarily top down, but it'll be sort of like the cathedral phenomenon where you'll have certain forces in society trying to push it in their sphere of influence.
Yeah.
And the question is, how far will it go? I think the government would be making a big mistake to push it.
Do you think it would topple a government if they decide to implement it again?
Well, no, that's the problem. But I think it would be like, say Trudeau
He said it's back. Yeah. Everyone
started pushing it.
Yeah.
I think it would be not positive for him.
What if he said all federal employees have to be boosted?
That would be hilarious.
Wouldn't that be awesome, dude?
Yes.
All federal employees, aviations, all contractors, anybody who touches a federal dollar better be fucking max vaxxed.
That would be hilarious.
I think he should do it.
And you can imagine, like, that's not super far-fetched.
No, it's not.
Like, and some of these places still have these, like, requirements
They
in
do.
place, especially a lot of government offices. And, like, can you even get, like, okay, let's say I'm what they call the pure blood.
Yeah.
But let's say I just had this change of heart all of a sudden. I'm like, well, I'd really like to get vaccinated
No, I
against
think
a 2-year-old virus.
Someone looked into it.
Can I go get the vaccine? Like, what does that even mean at this point?
No, you can't just roll out and get a booster equivalent. You have to get, if you're like, oh, I want it, they have to give you the whole cycle, dude. So you have to get the one that was quote unquote effective against the original one and the one that was like less effective. So if you want vaccine right
So
now,
I got to get a vaccine.
It's gonna take you a year.
So I got to spend a year getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
It's starting with 2 doses for something that basically doesn't exist anymore. That shows the religious aspect of it all.
well, you can make the argument. They're like, oh, well, polio doesn't exist anymore. Meh. And we're like, no, but like this is still effective against polio, right? And they're like, oh yeah, yeah. If polio ever came back, you wouldn't be a problem for you. We're like, well, if SARS comes back, will it be a problem? They're like, well, it's complicated.
See,
If you get your shots, you can't spread it.
I think one of the big signs that people are even the mainstream people are done with it. I'm sure there's anecdotes where you've talked to people who got their doses and they ain't touching any boosters ever again.
Yeah.
But we can see the numbers. Like, nobody wants the boosters.
Yeah.
Even a long time ago, like, that ship has sailed. Like, what, 20% of people got them?
Something like that, yeah.
Nobody wanted them. They just were basically forced. Like, I want to go on vacation, or I want to
Yeah.
go to the movie theater. I want to go eat at the
I
restaurant.
want to put food on my table.
I think, there was true believers, but I think there was a big chunk of the population who didn't want it at all.
Every Twitter doctor ever.
Twitter doctors.
Twitter
are the
doctors,
worst.
dude. I fucking hate them, dude.
And I think it's helpful to consider that when it comes to the IQ debate that we sometimes see on the right.
Yeah.
A lot of people are obsessed with the IQ issue. It's like, oh, if only people were smarter, like society would be better. It's like, look at the places where the smartest people are. Like doctors, for example. These aren't dumb people.
Yeah.
But I don't like, these people are horrible decision makers and horrible judges of, the right thing to do, I think. And in our elite universities, these people are all smart. They're probably smarter than me, maybe smarter than you. I don't know. But like socialism and communism, like reign supreme in their mentality. Like these are the dumbest smart people ever. And I think, a smart guy who's evil can really hurt you. And I'll take the dumb, virtuous guy. Some people will say like, oh, well, IQ is correlated with virtue. And I don't think that's necessarily true at
not
all.
even close, dude.
But that's what
I think
some of the IQ debate folks on the right who are really fixated on that issue.
might line up
It's a
with
very
conscientiousness,
incomplete,
but not
it's a very
virtue.
incomplete view of the world. It's sort of like the religious perspective. It's like always the explaining factor.
It's like Invader Zim. Whoever's tallest is in charge. So like the taller you are, the more worthy of being a leader you are, which kind of holds up.
Because what is it like? You can be really smart, but that doesn't mean fill in the gap.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you make good decisions, or it doesn't mean you're a good judge of
anything.
conflicting
Yeah.
opinions. And I think there's like a big chunk of that midwit category, which is why we have that word. I think it's almost like you're more compliant. Or what's the line? It's easier to teach a smart dog tricks and to teach a smart dog to be obedient than the dumb dog.
Yeah.
And I of course love the bell curve meme
Yeah,
with
and-
like the grog on the one side and like the super genius
The
on
grog
the other
and
side.
genius are always lined up, dude.
Yeah, and then the midwit in the middle, because that was something they saw during the virus panic too, with so-called vaccine hesitancy. I don't
Yeah.
like to use the news speak, but we'll use it for now.
Skepticism?
Like 140 IQ plus was like, I ain't touched the
Fuck you. No, there was an article in the Atlantic or some other place, and they're like, academia has a real like anti-vax problem. They're like, yeah, we've noticed that like the highest percentage in terms of education and that
like the mathematicians and the scientist
they're
types.
they're like for some reason anyone with a doctorate, like half of them don't get vaxxed. And I was like,
But not just doctorate. I think it was, not like a doctor of
doctorate,
sociology. Yeah, but like doctor.
oh, you mean like
PhD
of an
doctor.
actual doctorate?
Like something where you actually do have to be more than a midwit. Like
Yeah.
you can't be 100 IQ guy who's getting the PhD in like advanced mathematics. At least I don't think that's probably possible.
I don't think so.
But you can be IQ 95 or 105 and get your
Humanities doctorate.
get like your Anita Sarkeesian master's program.
Let's have can we have a moment of silence for feminist frequency here real quick? Just,
Okay, 1 minute of silence,
I want,
which can be edited out in post production.
how about,
I'm delighted to see it collapse. What's she up to these days? Does anyone care?
No.
Is that why it collapsed?
the grift never ends, bro. I don't know. Maybe she's giving another talk to the UN Council on Women.
I think she's toast. I think these are major flash in the pan kind of characters, and she was like big for a moment,
Big.
but you can't sustain it because the left always has to move on to the next big outrage.
Yeah.
And we're talking like 2014. When was that whole thing?
Gamergate was 20.
So that's ancient history now. Like the social justice outrage mob has moved on big time. And that was interesting. Like, remember the glory days of anti-feminist and anti-SGW YouTube? Like
Yeah,
there
man.
was some really good content at the time. Kind of a lot of it was in reaction to that whole scene that unfolded. Like,
Yeah,
I
like-
remember the day you were over at my house and you explained it to me because I didn't know what was going on. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, like,
Here's
you
what's up.
showed me some video. I'm like,
the
I don't
Five
get it.
Guys
What are
video.
they talking about? No, it was an internet aristocrat.
Yeah, the
video.
Five Guys video.
No, it was specific. Well, I don't
That's
know.
what it was titled. I
It
still
was
remember it to this
specifically
day.
the one where
Rest in peace, fucking Jim.
Medicare, is he dead? Did he have cancer?
He did his last stream and he fucking son said to himself, he's like, I got some kind of fucking
Is he
disease.
dead?
I got some kind of disease. This is the last stream, buddy.
So anyway, you came over, and we were just watching videos or whatever.
Yeah.
And you put on some internet aristocrat video, and the basis for the video was that clip someone found from her classroom where she's like, I don't play video games.
yeah.
And then he went through a bunch of forum like simps defending her, Anita simps.
Yeah.
And it was all like, well, it doesn't matter if she
Doesn't matter.
she has a few good points, doesn't she?
Heckin' valid.
Anyway, Anita Sarkeesian was
There's videos of her in some like multi-level marketing fucking scam.
yeah, she was a scammer for sure. Because she never delivered on her project. She just scooped up like a few $100,000.
Yeah. So Gamergate.
And then she had unpaid like a troon and and some other like lackey doing
Yeah.
unpaid like podcasts. For
yeah, unpaid, dude. She's like, yeah, here we are at the. I think it was part of their. It was their Patreon goal. They were contractually obligated to do that, and then she's just like, I'm gonna let the little homies ride on these people. Fuck that. I'm not doing shit.
And then she started a new grift for like great women in history.
Oh yeah,
Some of whom were like brutal warlords.
Boudica. Check it
I don't
out.
know. I mean, maybe that's interesting. Like,
I guess. I mean, it's history. It's kind of cool.
great women
like,
in history is an interesting topic as long as it's not the feminism talking about it, because they'll kind of they'll turn it into
Are
something
you
it's
sure?
not.
Are you sure Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian? Whatever the fuck Egyptian means.
Yeah, I
in fucking
watched
64 BC.
I learned all about it on the Netflix documentary.
She wasn't Greek. She wasn't Greek.
My
dare
grandmother said she wasn't Greek.
Like, yeah,
That's
okay.
all I need to know.
That's cool. She was Egyptian because she was the first ruler that learned Egyptian.
Why do you think Egypt is such a battleground for like the Kang side on the one hand, and then the like secret Hyborian Aryan like
No,
civilization?
because
Everyone wants claim over the pyramids. It was my people who built the pyramids.
do you think it's the humanist holy land? Dude, the pyramids are the Western Wall to like the humanist. They're like, check out agrarian society, motherfucker. Look at these pyramids. They're not building those in the middle of nowhere in fucking Iceland.
I mean, it's crazy. Like it is actually, they are truly astonishing.
Yeah.
But maybe we should skirt the schizo theories
Yeah,
and stuff.
we
but
all know them. Yeah. No, I think Egypt is Mecca for people who look at humans as the true gods of reality. Because they're like, look at what we did, and they're like, there used to be a super awesome library here. You don't see it anymore because these evil people burnt it, and I don't know. Maybe Egypt was classically like, well, because like it made the most money after Alexander, like, you know, fucked the world in half. One of his homies was like, yeah, I guess I'll just take this because it was like had the most money and whatever. So it was like these Troy and Greek like hardcore dudes who were always in charge of the place, like the Ptolemaics or whatever, right? It was like the breadbasket, dude. Like you just got all your shit from Egypt.
Well, I don't know. It's like it's a classic great civilization, and the story is very interesting. But you know, I wouldn't really want to claim it for my own in a sense, because I think they're the bad guys. Like ancient Egypt, like the Pharaoh. You know, like I'm an Exodus kind of guy.
Are you
So, like,
are you one of the lost tribes?
No.
I think we all are part of the lost tribe.
But I think they were
But they said the third pharaoh was like from Nubia, and that's why they're like, no, we was, you know?
I don't know.
Who knows?
It's pretty interesting though. Did you know that in Exodus 12:12, when Yahweh says, "I've judged the gods of Egypt,"
Yeah.
following the 10 plagues, did you know the 10 plagues each represent an attack on a specific Egyptian deity?
No, I didn't know that.
So, for example, like the first plague, when he turns Nile into blood, that's an attack on the river god Hapi, who controls the Nile. So it's like, you're not in control, Yahweh's in control. Or the second plague of frogs,
Yeah.
that's an attack on Heket, the frog-headed goddess who controls the frogs. And so on and so forth, all of them. And it culminates in the plague of darkness,
Blotting out the sun.
which is blotting out the sun god Re. Like, you think he's in charge? No. And he's supposed to be a maintainer of cosmic order, like what Egyptians would have called like the Mayat. And Pharaoh, of course, he's like a god on earth. As far as these people are concerned, he is the avatar of the gods, or he's like the sun god avatar. So it's like an attack on him. And then you culminate on the final plague, the death of the firstborn, which is like cutting him off, basically. Anyway, just a fun fact
What
for
about-
you. Was that interesting?
It is. Is Horus considered a god then? Because he is Ra.
But he's not like subject of those.
But he is the son of Horus. Right? He's a Trinity.
I don't know. What's the deal with Horus again?
Son of Ra. Ra made manifest. Part of the Holy Spirit was like a Trinity. And it was an Egyptian Trinity, dude.
I don't think it really works that way, but
Pretty sure I remember reading something about they're like, yo, check this out. I was like, oh shit, no way.
Yeah, I don't know. I forget I'm blanked out on the Horus thing.
The real answer is who cares?
I think all that I think that's real.
Yeah?
Like that's real life, man.
Huh.
Well,
Oh, bald
the
kitty.
fuzzy cat versus the bald cat in the studio.
Who wins? Oh man, they're like, man. Oh, bald cat won.
Bald cat's annoying and the other one doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Speaking of Egyptian,
Yeah. Dude, yeah, Egyptians gave us cats. Cat worship.
gave us bald cats.
They were full of toxoplasmosis.
This cat feels weird.
Yeah, it's
See
a little
ya.
weird.
Okay, they're gone. Minor disturbance.
At first, I was like, I thought, looking at that cat, it looks like a testicle feels. I suspect.
I hate to say it, but that's kind of true.
Yeah.
Or a Balzac.
Dude, it's fun to pet. I'm just going to say it.
I like it. It's quite a charming.
It's like a different soothing.
I was ambivalent at best when my spouse was going to bring this into our lives.
Yeah.
But now I'm on board.
How do you feel about, because the way you were about to say spell out, I was like, oh, don't say significant other. It's like, no.
That's the worst expression.
How do you feel when people say partner?
Hate it.
In casual conversation. Doesn't it fucking throw you for a loop?
I think
Like,
the only time I think it's okay is if you're like an older couple, like say you're in your 60s and like you're a divorcee or something.
Yeah.
Then it seems weird to talk about boyfriend, girlfriend. Like that seems like a kid thing almost.
whatever happened to like my beau or my I say the missus, which annoys her, but yeah, those are the words I use.
Did you ever say the woman?
No, I say the missus.
That's not bad. But partner is kind of cringe.
It
to
makes
me.
it makes
And it makes me wonder what they're really talking about.
dude. Yeah, it gets my full
Like,
attention.
is this
dude.
LGBT?
Yeah, you're just like, what do you mean partner? Why are we not using gendered words here? What are you up to?
Partner.
What's
so
your-
I think if you're 60 or over, I think you can get away with it.
Really?
59 or less, you better not be saying partner.
Yeah.
Subject to minor adjustment on the cutoff point.
I don't know. Partner to me just seems like a.
Like what? Let's say you had a teenage son,
Yeah.
and he comes home one day. He's like, "Oh, this weekend I'd like you to meet my partner."
Or for your lab, your science experiment, your science. What do you mean partner?
Or what? Your like chess club partner?
Yeah, or you started a small business. Is
Or
that
your,
is this an enterprise?
like a lemonade stand partner?
Yeah. Like, are
No,
you
my partner, my girlfriend.
what? Son,
Would you give him a smack upside the head?
have a seat.
Have a seat, boy. You listen to me, boy.
Look, you got to stop using these words. They matter. Words matter. If you want to say words are violence, you just hit me.
Yeah, no ixnay on the partner.
Yeah, no deal. What do you think about the debate? Gay son or thought daughter?
Well, should we reiterate the previous
No,
thoughts
it was just
indicated?
It was. I do have a note here. So
Again, I'm gonna fall back on the grandkids issue.
Yeah.
because your promiscuous daughter can provide grandkids, and then there's some hope for them.
no,
but-
you raised a whore. There's no hope for her fucking children, dude.
I think there's a chance, but I don't think it's looking so good.
Do you think that you know how like there was a trend or like there's this implication that the giving of like birth will like straighten out a man or a woman? Do you know what I mean? Like they're like, oh, he'll settle down once he has kids. Like he'll fucking straighten up and fly right.
I think there's probably some truth to it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's over exaggerated, but you know, some kind of low life people, they're like, oh well,
It seems
if
like
I do this, it'll clean up my life.
it seems like a gamble, dude.
It is a gamble, but I think I think things do change for people when there's like someone else responsible for them. So they're not going to necessarily fully be reformed, but I think it's going to really change the dynamic.
Do you think those people should house migrants instead? They don't need their own children.
Do you think spinsters should house migrants?
Absolutely, dude. If you're over 45 and single,
What
as a
about
woman,
refugees from Northwest Territories because the forest burned
dude,
down?
I can't think of a better cause to give money to.
What, people in Northwest Territories?
Yeah.
That's your number one cause?
Well, when it comes to like money being spent, like, would you rather house and feed like somebody from the Northwest Territories, or like half of a cluster bomb for Ukraine? Because that money's going to get spent regardless. So it's like, where do you want to go?
Well, I'd say, it's like your spheres. Like if you throw the rock in the pond and you get the ripples, like you want to get the closer ones first.
Yeah, but I want this ripple to kill a Russian. You were like, no, I want my ripple to feed and clothe like somebody who's been displaced by like a natural disaster. And they're like, fuck that, kill Russians. We hate Putin, remember? Look at all the things that he did to you. And you're like, yeah, that's done shit to me, dude.
Yeah, I'd
look at how many Iraqis he didn't kill. Isn't that fucking preposterous?
Yeah, he was Assad's friend.
Yeah. Dude, Assad's still a badass, though. I love Assad.
Assad's still ticking.
Yeah, man. How?
I don't really. I used to be like totally up to speed on all that stuff, and now
Dude,
it's all crumbled in the last few years. I'm a little out of touch, but
I would only trust Ryan.
I used to be able to name all the factions in the Syrian war.
I would only trust Ryan Dawson to tell me what's going on.
I like Ryan Dawson.
Isn't that guy a fucking weapon?
Yeah, he's pretty funny.
He's the schizo equivalent to James Lindsay. Like, you know how there's like the guy that you're like, okay, let's hear what this guy has to say. I feel like Dawson has earned trust to just be a contrarian and just kind of be like, you know, people always try to paint him as like anti-Semitic, and he's just like, what do you, in order to like undercut his take on things. And they're like, hey, you know, all this shit is about oil, right? And they're just like, no, you just hate Israel. He's like, fuck. He goes, 9/11 wasn't really didn't really go down like that. And they're like, you just hate fucking Israel, don't you? I knew it.
Well, yeah, and he dunks on the anti-Semites and says it's important to focus on he thinks the Zionism thing is like big, and sometimes that's kind of like the code for the anti-Semite. But for some of these anti-war, anti-imperial guys, like Zionism is like the big motivating factor. So and obviously there's a lot of like Israeli influence in American foreign policy, like the Iraq thing, which we talked about, and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But taking out Syria and taking out Lebanon and interfering with Iran and stuff. But speaking of James Lindsay, let's talk about that a little bit, because so a few months back, he basically says like a lot of this woke religion stuff emerges from like sort of a mutated Marxism.
Yeah.
And Paul Gottfried, who's himself kind of an expert in what many people call cultural Marxism and classical Marxism and like the modern sort of multicultural post-Marxist leftism. Gottfried argues that, you know, it's not what we think of as like the woke religion isn't really Marxist in a classical sense. And I basically agree with that. Okay. And Lindsay was like, who's this idiot? Like, he doesn't know anything. And like, that's kind of embarrassing for him because
you should know that name.
Like, yeah, this is,
or you should have heard that name.
This guy's got like real legitimate expertise in that area. And so Lindsay, I think he draws a lot of correct connections to like the way Marxist ideas kind of like dissolved and reconstituted themselves in different forms. And But anyway, the thing we were talking about before was Paul Gottfried's like a right winger.
Yeah.
So, and Lindsay says like the big threat is the right wingers. That they're worse than like the woke left, despite his attention being on, like the postmodern, post-Marxist left, whatever we want to call it. He's got his eyes that's his main target. But he's, as I was saying kind of before in our previous conversation, he is at his heart like a leftist. And a lot of these like liberals who the left went just a little too far for them, they're still fundamentally on the left, but they still regard the right as like the worst threat. So they won't become right wingers themselves. They want to like reform the left, or they want to like save the left, or their version of it. They're like liberals, not leftists, or however you want to, you know what I mean?
Big L, small L.
So what do you think of this whole thing? Like these effective critics, in many respects, of the woke left, for lack of a better term, but who at the same time are still within that broader left paradigm, and their hostility to the right, in my opinion, really kind of undermines their program in a lot of ways. I can't regard them fully as allies in this fight, because again, they're trying to criticize their side from their side, which has an important place. But I don't think they're like our allies. I think they'd sell right wingers like myself out way before they'd turn against like the extreme versions on their side.
Remember when we were talking about the fucking guy in the wife beater calling Freeland a fucking cunt or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, and like people on the right, they're like, "Oh, that's rude. I'd never do that. That's lowbrow." And I'm like, "No, that's your side, homie. Sorry." And like, unfortunately, there's factions within the side, and like, unfortunately, you're peeling back the onion and kind of being like, "Oh, there's factions within the left," and like, yeah, of course, there always has been. Like, Big L, like, like libertarianism is in itself sort of a left wing thing. It's, it kind of says like, look, freedom, like liberty is the greatest value possible. It is the principle from which all other things should deride. And the purity test of like, oh, well, maybe Lindsay, you can be like, well, Lindsay's a Christian, so he can't be that left wing, right?
He's not a Christian.
He is.
No, I'm pretty sure he's an atheist.
No.
What?
No.
Do I need to get the fact checkers?
Are you gonna fucking source me on this?
I need a source.
I'm gonna debunk.
Do I need to debunk it? I got a computer right here.
Yeah.
Don't test me.
Oh, do it.
Okay, I'm gonna debunk.
Do it, bitch.
Here comes the debunking.
He had a big problem with the Baptist coalition and stuff like that. However, we've encountered a pastor recently who penned a very disgusting article.
Sorry, start that sentence over again. I was deep in the debunking process, and I kind of
remember there was that pastor. I think you dunked on him through the account where it was like, yeah, your next step is to write the Christian case for ethical like gender reassignment or something like that. He's that guy. He's like, because I think I wrote something like, because it was so fucking stupid. And I was like, hey, it's weird how anytime somebody tries to defend, they say, oh, you're being too zealous in your opposition to pedophilia. And they always compare it for some reason to anti-Semitism. They're just like, you know who else suffered because the mob thought it was a good idea? Like the Jews. And it's just like, this is not the same. Like, you're disgusting. Why do you have to bring up the Jews? This has nothing. Like, these are people who fuck children and want to fuck children. Like,
Yeah, it's
stop
it's
this.
weird.
And he goes, oh no, just blind hate. And I'm like, yes, this is blind hate. They must be eliminated.
Yeah,
And they're
no
like-
tolerance.
And they're like, this is just like anti-Semitism. I'm like, what are you What are you talking about?
So anyway, not to derail the point, but you have been debunked.
He's an atheist?
He's definitely an atheist.
I thought he was a Baptist.
Maybe he was raised that way, but he's an atheist, and he's actually gone to. He's been brought in to like speak at Christian events, and he says things like, you know, I'm not like one of you, or I don't believe these things, but like this is what you need to know. And
Okay.
so he's like an atheist leftist kind of guy.
Can he not be agnostic? Would your condemnation be like,
I've never really been on board with the atheist agnostic distinction. It always kind of felt sort of artificial to me.
yeah,
But
you're saying pick a lane?
I think it's like fussing over a distinction that really is basically irrelevant. Like, we've got the law of the excluded middle. Either theism is correct or theism is incorrect. Like, those are the only options. You can parse up the not correct thing in a million different ways. There's lots of gradations there. Same thing on the other side.
You're
but
not a third pather?
no. I accept the law of the excluded middle.
No, because he wrote a bunch. Like, he's always
Now, this left-wing source is very critical of him because he has teamed up with a lot of, quote, right-wing
evangelicals,
groups.
Baptists.
He teamed up with Christian nationalists, such and such, conspiracy theory guy, such and such. And, you know, I think this is kind of like one of the issues with the right. Not to dunk on this guy too much because he does useful work, and I really like how James Lindsay reads the primary texts of these villains that are kind of the intellectual substructure, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The intellectual basis for kind of like the popular movements that we see.
yeah.
Because a lot of people don't read this stuff, and they get a lot of it wrong. Like, I'm a big fan of like, read the text, read the source. Like, what does it actually say? And he does good research and does good explications of a lot of these books and things. And a lot of people, you know, I've been reading some of these like old left-wing philosophers and stuff, and they're quite hard to read and quite awful in a lot of ways. Like, I mean, putting aside the validity or lack of the ideas, like the actual texts are not fun to read. Like, they're grim, and like the writing style is very weird for a lot of these people, where they explain things very poorly because it's kind of like this big.
It was revealed to me in a dream.
No, it's like
Source.
it's not like a mystical thing, although maybe there's an aspect to it, but it's sort of like this broad community where everything's written as if everyone has read everything else. And so things are generally not presented in a very systematic way, and it assumes a lot on the part of the reader in terms of background knowledge.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's very hard to read. So I give him credit for digging into it and like learning this stuff and making it digestible for people.
My problem with it is that he and you will never be current.
No, that's okay.
You're like, it's like that scene in fucking Good Will Hunting, where like the fucking Yaley comes over and he's like talking about like pre-colonial economics, and he's just like, oh, you're gonna read this book and then this book and then this book, and it's eventually you're gonna find out like whatever. And he's like, you're retarded. You have no originality. Like, knowing this stuff doesn't mean anything. And going through like the epochs of economic thought in the colonies or something like that. And like, I feel that way about like kind of like most of those social theories. I feel like I don't need to read that shit because at some point some guy has been like, oh no, it's actually like this. Like, drawing on their works, this is where they made their critical distinction. Like, everybody tried to, you know, they're like, oh, Marx was correct except for this one thing. So I'm like, I'm gonna fucking like scribble out this. He wasn't fundamentally incorrect. I'm gonna scribble out this one little fucking gotcha and
Well,
put
some
in my
texts
own.
are more important than others, and
Yeah.
like it doesn't have. And yeah, a lot of people are gonna be just kind of taking a core and making a little bit of a spin or slight innovation on it, or sometimes like thinking they're innovating when something else has already like done it before. And but that's why you go to the heavyweights. Like there's kind of like, if you imagine a diagram where there's like a big core to it, and then there's kind of like splintering off of the smaller mines that are less significant, and you get those variations that are maybe more modern, but it all still basically stems from the bigger, like the heavyweights. Like if you wanted to understand Marxism pretty well, like you would go back and read Das Kapital, like God help you.
No, well, I don't know if you do. Like, and here's the next question is, do you need to read Das Kapital in order to understand the modern day neo-communist? No, it's actually
I think you kind of everyone doesn't need to do it, but I think if you want to be kind of like
it was a trick question because I put the word neo in there.
I don't know, I guess I got tricked.
Bamboozled,
debunked.
No, I thought Lindsay was a Christian because he works with Christian orgs, and at the same time, I think I don't know if you need to read those texts to understand your, like, for someone to be I guess if you want to be a dyed-in-the-wool communist or Marxist, if you want to be a tanky, like, yeah, you should probably fucking read that shit. But you don't. Do you want to? You know what I mean? Like, if you agree with it, you're like, yo, I'm a theist. There's God, and you're like, yo, you should read these books about God, about these original source materials.
So, do you think you should not read the Bible if you're a theist?
No, I think you should. But if you're an atheist, I don't think atheists need to read the Bible.
I think everyone needs to read the Bible, especially atheists.
Yeah.
Atheists are often the worst too, because they get so much of their biblical knowledge, quote unquote, from idiots and YouTube videos, and they never look at the actual text. Like, whether they agree with it or not, they should at least learn what it says.
Yeah,
if they want to be like a serious critic of something.
There's so much Mott and Bailey there, though, because they'd be like, well, that's the King James version and the fucking Aramaic version, fucking blah, blah, blah. Like, dude, you know what I'm saying?
They're
like,
mostly the same. You can pick one.
You know, and be like, oh, well, no, it was in this language. It was getting like, dude, the right-wing nationalists get their hands on that, and they're like, oh, this was all the Jews. The Jews did this. This was actually a condemnation of the Jews, and they're like, oh no, these tribes of Israel, and this was actually this lost tribe, and it was a reversal of that. And
what about making up your own mind, like going to the source?
So do you think reading the King James version of the Bible will let you determine whether there was something going on, whether you're being bamboozled by reading the King James version? Do you know what I'm saying here? Like, do you think that will give you insight as to whether what is being said there is the actual truth or not? It's a tough one.
In and of itself, like, you need a little bit of external information to validate the text you're reading.
No, it would validate the claim, not the text.
Okay, I don't know if I understand the question.
Okay, so I just don't think reading the Bible in its in any particular iteration is enough to allow you to answer questions about the validity of the text itself. Like the validity of the work as a whole, not necessarily passages. They're like, oh, did you know that Marx said blah, blah, blah? And you'd be like, oh, and you'd be like, imagine somebody said like, oh, you know, this is all like made up, and this was like a bet that he had with someone that he could convince a bunch of people that fucking labor was the only source of value. like reading Das Kapital doesn't give you insight as to whether this is a prank or not.
Well,
Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I guess you can be maybe cynical is not the right word, but like you can kind of doubt the material, but
Like it's a worthwhile endeavor. Do you think that it will? Is it an exercise in your own amusement, or do you think it will make you like more untrue? You know what I mean?
well, obviously you would agree that you can understand something better or worse based on
Yeah.
So like I've obviously read a lot of things over the years that I very strongly agree with or in a majority sense align with what I believe, and I like reading philosophy. Recently I've been kind of getting into reading some of these bad guys just because I don't know what the original motivation was, but just if I can relate it to some of my experience with like Marxism and talking with so-called Marxists or people who think they know Marxism, it's sometimes interesting to discover that a lot of so-called Marxism people don't like know what Marx actually wrote, and they haven't read any of his books and stuff. And like, it's interesting knowing the bad guys' sources better than the bad guys know them themselves.
Okay.
And there's also like a weird, I think I was saying it's kind of like horror literature in a way. Like it's kind of like I like reading Lovecraft or Ligotti and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I like the purpose of like horror or weird fiction is like that feeling of being unnerved. And there's a strange kind of, maybe not amusement, but there's an interesting experience reading some of this stuff.
It's perverse.
It is kind of perverse, and it's like because it makes this attack on a lot of this stuff makes attacks on like our rational foundations of thought, or like our rational or our presuppositions of rational thought. And it's kind of interesting, and in a sense I think it's useful to strengthen your own position, to read the bad guys, understand like arguments. So I want to have like the strongest position myself, even though, like you said, does that make my position more true, and is that more useful? And I think like, yeah, it kind of does.
Do you think a 14th century Catholic is less of a Catholic than a 20th century Catholic? I think they're actually more of a Catholic than a 20th century Catholic.
I guess it depends what you
They
would
never
say
read
makes a Catholic a Catholic.
Yet not reading the Bible is what makes a fucking Catholic, because it was in Latin and they couldn't speak it.
Yeah, I think it was a good innovation to have more
all-
regular Joes reading the book.
It was all Luther's fault.
Luther, I mean, I like the idea of the like regular Joes reading the book.
Well, there was a huge trend after that kind of happened to a lot of people. And there's a lot of conspiracies about it, whether there was like a weird disassociation between the left and the right brain. But like all of a sudden everyone became a conduit for God. And they're like, I read the book, and like Jesus, or like God is telling me this.
Yeah, no, I think
Dude,
in a lot of ways that's a total disaster, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm a decentralization kind of guy. And like, you know, if you have multiple corruptions like spread out, I think it's not good, but in a way I think that's better than having like one major corruption at the top. And it allows like, I think it allows for like kind of self-criticism or self-evaluation, or like fixing things, or like,
Do you think that text should be written or read in their like original language? Like, do you trust translators?
oh yeah, for the most part, but I mean, you've got lots of, like, most people say you want to read the Old Testament, like you don't know biblical Hebrew, you're like, it's not happening. Most of the translators or translations are done by, you know, experts who want to do a good job. And there's controversial passages or verses where there's going to be some disagreement, and there's going to be divergence on different translations. And I think that's okay. That's why you can use different translations. But for the most part, I think you can basically pick one of the main ones
Yeah.
and you're gonna do okay.
I don't know.
I like the ESV because it uses the Dead Sea Scrolls.
I just think of like just watching certain animes, how it's been localized, and you're like, oh, they it's okay to say this in Japan, but you can't say this over here. Like, I think there's
No, I've seen that because I've rewatched things like many years later on a different service, where the subtitle track has been different than it was when I originally watched it. And like, I pick up on things.
The whole thing, dude.
Sometimes it's really not a good change, and it's unfortunate. And that's just part of life. But I don't think that undermines the whole process. Obviously, you could get some really bad examples where a translation really buggers things up.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases,
you've
got some pretty reliable resources at your fingertips, and you can put in the extra effort to like make educated judgments on things that are more controversial or less agreeable.
I think the 12th century Catholics were better Catholics than current era Catholics.
Well, I don't know what's up with the Catholic Church these days.
Well, it's losing.
I think it's really suffering from what I can tell.
It's got too many Christians, not enough Catholics. Do you know what I'm saying? This all comes back to that Anglican fucking reverend.
Should we say his name?
What is it?
Michael Corrin.
What a loser,
I
dude.
can't stand that guy.
The best part is he responded. He was like, show us your real name, pussy.
Like, get a life.
Fuck off.
No, I think guys like him are very corrosive to like standards within like the Christian world, and they're like the Samuel L. Jackson in Django Unchained or whatever. Yeah. They're the accomplice to the regime that is undermining what they're supposedly supposed to be representing, and these are the kind of guys. That's why I always make the joke, like the Christian case for
ethical,
10 years ago, Christian case for gay marriage, or now it'd be the Christian case for transitioning your child, or the Christian case for supporting BLM or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter, but these guys are there to push the regime's narrative, not with like the disguise of their religion, but they're not really serving the religion, they're serving the regime. And I really don't like people like that.
Because I think a lot of this problem boils down to Christianity's preoccupation with having sympathy for that which they should find disgusting. They see it as personal, like it's a personal test to empathize with and have sympathy for that which they should find reprehensible. And it's this idea of tolerance that I think is at the like what has gone wrong there.
Like, that's really interesting because there's the meme that kind of goes around that says tolerance is not a Christian virtue.
It is.
I don't know about that. I think there's clear standards. A religion is kind of by definition like kind of imposing standards on a community, right? And
why don't you go ask your gay deacon about it?
So yeah. Now, so look at like biblical New Testament stories or something.
Yeah.
People will say like, oh, well, Jesus is going and he's hanging out with the prostitutes and he's being tolerant.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's a misinterpretation of what's going on, because he's not tolerating their lifestyle. He's going after them because they're the sick ones, and he's trying to bring them up.
Yeah.
He's like, you need to repent. That's not tolerance. That's like pretty much the opposite. So there's this kind of idea like, God loves sinners, so it's okay to be a sinner. Or God even loves the evil one, so it's okay to be evil. Like, that's the wrong message to take from that. What it really is God loves sinners, which is why he wants to correct you. He wants to heal you. He wants to bring you into a better way of living or a better way of being. And so it's the this tolerance idea, I don't think it's a good value for, like in the political level, it lets bad people take over, because the bad guys aren't going to tolerate you even when you're tolerating them.
See,
And in a religious sense, it's like it's basically removal of standards. Like a lot of these leftists, especially like these really shallow, awful leftists, they
Harris?
hold
this is the first thing I thought of.
tolerance as this great virtue. And I think what it comes down to, like being tolerant, is not being responsible for anything, like basically not being accountable. You want to be tolerated because you're kind of a crappy person, or because you don't want to submit to like the higher standards of society or whatever. I don't like that.
How I got there was, and I'm not sure if it was actually him that said it, but there's this quote that had been attributed to Reagan that says, if someone agrees with you 80% of the time, they're your friend, not 20% traitor.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. But it's like that.
Depends what that 20% is.
But like, yeah, I mean, that's a good qualifier. But at the end of the day, like James Lindsay is your friend right now. He is. You know, and you can say, well, I think he'll sell me out. And it's just like, you know, I think the only way right wingers are ever going to fucking move forward is if they don't suffer the purity tests that the left have.
I think that's true in a lot of ways. But I think you also have to be careful about who you make your heroes out to be.
Yeah.
Like you can't.
Kanye West,
Yeah, that's like a disaster. But
Nick Fuentes.
total clown, total goof.
What about Alex Jones then?
I think he's a treasure.
Yeah.
Those other guys aren't.
Agreed.
Alex Jones is a special character.
Yeah.
He's wacky. He's zany.
Would you consider Joe Rogan a leftist?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I think it's pretty hard in the modern world to be
But he's a friend.
like yeah, he's a friend.
He's a friend, man.
In a lot of areas, he'd be like an associate.
He's the I won't comply this time guy.
Yeah, no comply.
I won't come this time. No, not doing it again. But he suffered for being reasonable.
Well, I think that's why a lot of people don't like him, because he's like being open-minded in a way is because the dogma nowadays, you know, says this is the box you're in.
Yeah.
If you're open-minded to what's outside of that, you're like going into the danger zone, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I think it's like that rule on internet forums where, you know, unmoderated forums are right wing.
Yeah.
And when they're moderated, they're always left wing.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. There's
Yeah.
there's like a tendency to, like, if you're allowed to notice things,
Yeah.
then you're going to notice things.
Yeah. You ever notice